The aroma of roast turkey and my grandmother's famous sage stuffing usually filled our home with a comforting warmth on Thanksgiving, a scent that was pure nostalgia. But this year, despite the golden brown bird glistening on the platter and the array of meticulously prepared side dishes, an undercurrent of ice permeated the festive air. My mother, Eleanor, 68 and showing the frail, heartbreaking early signs of memory issues, sat at the head of the table, looking a little lost, her gaze distant. My husband, David, and our 2 teenage kids, Emily and Josh, did their best to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Their chatter a little too bright, their smiles a little too forced. And then there was Michael, my older brother, a man I hadn't seen in nearly a year. His unexpected presence at our Thanksgiving table a dark, unwelcome cloud, casting a pall over everything. The meal itself was a tense, mostly silent affair, punctuated by the clinking of silverware and polite, strained inquiries about the mashed potatoes. The moment coffee was served, Michael, who had been picking at his food with a brooding intensity, cleared his throat. A sound that seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. He shot me a look, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Sarah," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "Can we, talk privately for a minute? In the study?" Mom looked up, her brow furrowed with a familiar anxiety whenever Michael was around. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked, her voice thin, wavering. "Everything's fine, Mom," Michael said, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Just a quick chat with my little sister." In the study, the scent of old books and David's pipe tobacco, usually a comfort, now felt suffocating. Michael didn't bother with pleasantries. He got straight to the point, his eyes, devoid of any familial warmth, boring into mine. "I need $50,000, Sarah," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. "And I need it by the end of the month." I stared at him, stunned into momentary silence. "50,000? I finally managed, my voice a strangled whisper. "Michael, are you insane? I don't have that kind of money just lying around. What on earth for?" We were comfortable, David and I, but not wealthy. $50,000 was a huge sum, our emergency fund, a significant chunk of the kids' college savings. A cruel, chilling smirk twisted Michael's lips. "Let's just say I have some pressing business debts that need to be settled. And if my dear little sister isn't inclined to help her big brother out in his time of need, well..." He leaned in then, his face inches from mine, his voice dropping to a venomous, terrifying whisper. "If you don't pay, Sarah, don't expect to see Mom again. Ever?" A cold, paralyzing terror seized me, squeezing the air from my lungs. My mother, vulnerable, increasingly dependent on me for her daily care, her memory already beginning to fray at the edges. Michael wouldn't. He couldn't. Or could he? The threat, monstrous and unthinkable, hung in the air between us. A poisonous cloud. He was, in essence, threatening to kidnap. To somehow spirit away our own mother if I didn't comply with his outrageous demand. My brother, my own flesh and blood, was holding our mother hostage. Michael had always been the charming screw-up, the prodigal son who never quite managed to find his footing. His life was a litany of failed get-rich-quick schemes, ill-advised investments, and a persistent, undeniable gambling problem that had surfaced in his late teens. He'd borrowed and, of course, never repaid, countless sums of money from our parents over the years, before our father passed away from a sudden heart attack a decade ago. And Mom had always had an unwavering, almost tragically blind spot for her firstborn. Her golden boy. She made endless excuses for his reckless behavior, bailed him out of one self-inflicted crisis after another, always believing his tearful promises of reform, his elaborate, tissue-thin lies. "He has a good heart, Sarah," she'd say, her voice laced with a desperate hope. He just needs a little help, a little understanding to find his way. He'll come good. You'll see. I, on the other hand, had always been the responsible one, the pragmatist, the caregiver by default. After Dad died, I was the one who stepped up, managing Mom's modest finances, navigating the complexities of her health care, and eventually, 3 years ago, moving her into our home when her memory issues became too significant for her to live alone safely. Michael, during these tough, emotionally draining years, had been conspicuously, infuriatingly absent. He'd surface periodically, usually when he needed something: a loan, a place to crash for a few weeks, a sympathetic ear to pour his latest tale of woe into, then disappear again, leaving a trail of broken promises and emotional wreckage in his wake. This wasn't even the first time he'd used Mom's vulnerability to his advantage. I remembered a particularly ugly incident a couple of years ago. Michael had borrowed Mom's emergency credit card, the one she kept for genuine crises, and maxed it out on what he'd claimed was a crucial business trip. It later turned out to be a week-long bender in Las Vegas. He'd then emotionally manipulated Mom, playing on her guilt and her fierce, protective maternal instincts, into forgiving him and, worse, pressuring me not to report the fraudulent charges. He promised he'd pay it all back. "Sarah, every penny," she'd pleaded, tears in her eyes. "Please don't cause more trouble for your brother. He's learned his lesson this time." I know he has. Of course, he never paid back a dime. The weight of Michael's demand, his horrifying threat, settled on me like a physical burden. I was a high school English teacher. David worked as a mid-level manager at a local manufacturing plant. We lived a comfortable, middle-class life, but we weren't rolling in money. $50,000 was an astronomical sum for us. It represented years of careful saving, our safety net, the foundation of our children's future education. The emotional toll was even greater. The stress of caring for an aging parent with progressive memory issues was already a significant daily challenge, a constant tightrope walk of patience, love, and exhaustion. Michael's sudden, unwelcome reappearance, and this monstrous ultimatum, felt like a breaking point. A betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter what little equilibrium we had managed to achieve. That night, after the kids were in bed and Mom was finally settled, her anxieties soothed by a cup of chamomile tea and her favorite old movie, I told David everything. His reaction was immediate, visceral fury. "He can't do this. Sarah," he'd exclaimed, his face flushed with anger. "This is extortion. It's unconscionable. We have to call the police, right now." But a paralyzing fear had taken root deep inside me. What if Michael did do something desperate? What if he tried to harm Mom, or somehow managed to take her away? She was so easily confused these days, so vulnerable, so trusting, especially of Michael, despite everything. The thought of her scared and bewildered, in some unfamiliar, potentially dangerous situation, was more than I could bear. "I don't know, David," I'd whispered, the words catching in my throat. "I just don't know what to do." Over the next few days, the pressure from Michael escalated, becoming a relentless, insidious campaign of psychological warfare. He bombarded my phone with calls and texts, each one a fresh twist of the knife. "TikTok, little sister, time's running out. Hope you're enjoying your quality time with Mom, while it lasts. Don't make me do something we'll all regret. Sarah." He started making brief, unsettling visits to our house. Visits I couldn't prevent without causing Mom extreme distress, as she still, despite everything, lit up whenever her darling Michael deigned to grace us with his presence. During these visits, he would subtly, skillfully manipulate her, poisoning her mind against me. He'd tell her, with a pained, sorrowful expression, that I was being difficult, unreasonable, about helping him out with a temporary cash flow problem for his exciting new business venture. He'd paint himself as the victim, the misunderstood entrepreneur, and me as the cold, unfeeling sister who refused to support her own brother. And Mom. Her judgment clouded by her fading memory and her unwavering, unconditional love for her son, began to fall for it. She started pleading with me, her eyes filled with a confused, anxious distress. "Michael just needs a little loan, dear," she'd say, her hand patting mine with a trembling urgency. "He's family. Sarah, we have to help family. Why are you being so hard on him? He says you don't want him to succeed, that you're jealous of his ambition." His insidious influence was working, twisting reality, making me the villain in my own mother's eyes, in my own home. I felt trapped, caught in an impossible, agonizing dilemma. If I reported Michael to the police, I risked him doing something truly desperate, something irreversible, to Mom. But if I paid him, if I succumbed to his blackmail, we would be financially crippled. And worse. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this wouldn't be the end of it. He'd be back for more, again and again, a parasitic leech draining us dry. A few days later, a call came from our cousin, Linda. Linda was Michael's contemporary, and they'd always shared a certain camaraderie. She was a bit shady herself, always on the lookout for an angle, but she occasionally shared snippets of Michael's disastrous life with me, perhaps out of a twisted sense of familial loyalty, or more likely, just for the thrill of the gossip. "Sarah, honey," Linda began, her voice dripping with a false, exaggerated concern that immediately set my teeth on edge. I just heard Michael's in a really tight spot, a real bind. Apparently, those guys he owes money to, well, they're not exactly nice people. If you catch my drift, he's really scared. Sarah, terrified. He even told me he might have to, relocate. For a while, and he'd absolutely hate to leave Eleanor behind, especially with her health. But if he has to go, he said he might just have to take her with him. For her own safety, to make sure she's looked after. The veiled threat was chillingly clear, a direct echo of Michael's own words, likely planted by Michael himself through Linda, a way to amplify the pressure, to confirm the seriousness of his intent. This wasn't just Michael being desperate, this was calculated, cold-blooded coercion. Then, as if by accident, Linda let slip the name of a new business associate Michael had been seen around town with, a notorious local loan shark named Vinny the Hammer Costello, a man with a reputation for extreme, violent methods of debt collection. This wasn't just some vague threat anymore. This gave Michael's desperation a concrete, terrifying face, a name that sent shivers of pure dread down my spine. I was now truly, profoundly terrified for my mother's safety. The stakes had just been raised to an unbearable level. That afternoon, my hands shaking, I made an appointment with a lawyer, Ms. Davies, who specialized in elder abuse and complex family law. She was sharp, incisive, and thankfully, deeply sympathetic to my plight. Ms. Davies listened patiently to my entire sordid story, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. She advised me, first and foremost, to meticulously document everything. Michael's threats, dates, times, exact wording if possible. Linda's call, any suspicious behavior I observed. She even suggested, delicately, installing discreet security cameras in the common areas of our home, with Mom's hazy, carefully worded consent, framed entirely as an extra safety measure for her, given her memory lapses. She also suggested, though she acknowledged the risk, that I try to get Michael to repeat his threat, ideally in a recordable format. "It's a gamble, Sarah," she'd said, her gaze steady. "But if he's foolish enough to incriminate himself on tape, it could be crucial leverage, either with him or, if necessary, with the authorities. $50,000, the price of my mother's safety. Or was it? A cold, hard realization began to dawn on me. This wasn't just about money for Michael. Not really. It was about power, about control. It was about punishing me, the responsible one, the one who had always managed to keep her head above water while he floundered in his own self-made chaos. And Vinny, the hammer, Costello? This was spiraling into a realm far beyond my comprehension, far beyond anything I was equipped to handle. But my mother, I would walk through fire for her. I would face down dragons. This wasn't just a threat against my financial security. It was a siege against my family, against everything I held dear, everything I had worked so hard to protect. And I would not surrender. I could not, stealing my nerves, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I called Michael a few days later. My phone was set to record the call, perfectly legal in our state with one-party consent for my own conversations. I feigned a desperate, almost hysterical panic. "Michael," I began, my voice deliberately shaky. I'm really trying to get the money together, but it's so hard. It's so much. Can you give me a little more time? And please, Michael, just promise me Mom will be safe. That you wouldn't really take her if I can't get it all by the end of the month? Michael, overconfident, arrogant, clearly relishing his perceived power over me, took the bait. "Time's running out, little sister," he sneered, his voice laced with a smug contempt. "And promises? Promises are cheap. No money. No Mom. It's as simple as that. Do you really want to see her wither away in some rundown, roach-infested motel room with me while I'm on the run from guys who want to break my kneecaps? Or do you want her safe and sound, tucked up in her own bed, with you? Your choice. Sarah, $50K, end of the month. Don't disappoint me. And don't disappoint Mom." He had explicitly, unequivocally confirmed the threat, his words a chilling testament to his depravity. I saved the recording immediately, my hands trembling. It was damning. It was horrifying. But it was also, potentially, my salvation. The deadline, the end of the month, approached with an agonizing slowness. Each day a fresh wave of terror. The stress was unbearable, a constant, crushing weight. Mom, sensing the palpable tension in the house, became increasingly agitated, her confusion deepening. She kept asking repeatedly why Michael was so upset with me, why I was being so unkind to her boy. Each question was a fresh stab of guilt, a reminder of the impossible position Michael had put me in. On Davies's astute advice, I told Michael I had the money. I arranged a family meeting at our house on the very last day of the month, under the guise of transferring the funds and clearing the air once and for all. I invited not only Michael, but also our Aunt Carol and Uncle Joe, our late father's respected, level-headed siblings who had always been fair-minded and deeply fond of Mom, and, strategically, Cousin Linda, as a potential, albeit unreliable, witness to Michael's desperation and the pressure he was under. I positioned the discreet security cameras carefully, their tiny lenses almost invisible. David, my rock, was briefed on the plan, on edge but resolutely supportive. The kids, Emily and Josh, were sent to a friend's house for a sleepover, safely out of harm's way. The atmosphere in our living room that evening was thick enough to cut with a knife when Michael arrived, a predatory, triumphant gleam in his eyes. Aunt Carol and Uncle Joe looked concerned and somewhat confused by the unexpected summons, their expressions questioning. Linda fidgeted nervously in her armchair, avoiding eye contact. Mom, bless her innocent heart, was seated in her favorite recliner by the fireplace, blissfully unaware of the true, ugly stakes of this family gathering, just happy to have so many of her loved ones around her, though she kept casting anxious, worried glances towards Michael. After some initial, excruciatingly awkward small talk, I took a deep breath and plunged in. "Michael," I began, my voice surprisingly calm, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. As you know, you asked me for $50,000, and you made it very clear, didn't you? That there would be severe consequences for Mom if I didn't comply. Michael smirked, a flash of avarice in his eyes. Just a little family loan. Sarah, to tide me over. Glad you finally saw sense and decided to do the right thing. Aunt Carol frowned, her brow furrowing. $50,000? Michael, what on earth do you need that kind of money for? Is everything all right? Michael waved a dismissive, impatient hand. Just a bit of business. Aunt Carol, nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about. Actually, Aunt Carol, Uncle Joe, I interjected, my voice gaining strength. I think you should worry. I think you both need to know the truth, because it wasn't just a polite request for a loan. Michael threatened me. He explicitly threatened our mother. He told me, in no uncertain terms, that if I didn't give him the $50,000, I wouldn't see Mom again. Ever. I turned then, looking directly at Michael, my gaze unwavering. Isn't that right, Michael? You threatened to take Mom away from her home, from her family, from her doctors, from everything familiar and safe if I didn't pay you your blood money? Michael scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. But I saw a flicker of unease, of surprise, in his eyes. Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You're being overly dramatic. As usual. I just said I was in a tough spot and might have to leave town for a while. And naturally, I'd hate for Mom to be left all alone and uncared for if that happened. No, Michael, I said. My voice like ice now, sharp and cutting. That's not what you said. That's not what you said at all. You said, and I quote you directly, no money, no Mom, simple as that. And then, I pressed play on my phone. The recording, crystal clear and amplified slightly by a small Bluetooth speaker I'd placed on the coffee table, filled the suddenly silent room. Michael, his voice, arrogant, sneering, unmistakable, on the recording. No money, no Mom, simple as that. Do you really want to see her wither away in some rundown, roach-infested motel room with me while I'm on the run from guys who want to break my kneecaps? A stunned, horrified silence descended upon the room. Aunt Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Uncle Joe looked absolutely thunderous, his face darkening with a righteous fury. Linda visibly shrank in her armchair, looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Mom looked from Michael to me, her face crumpling in utter confusion and a dawning, terrified distress. Michael? She whispered, her voice trembling. Michael, my boy. What is she saying? What does this mean? Michael's face turned a dangerous, apoplectic shade of purple. His carefully constructed facade of cool composure shattered. You conniving bitch, he roared, his eyes blazing with a murderous rage. You recorded me? You set me up? He lunged towards me, his hands outstretched as if to throttle me. David, who had been standing quietly, almost invisibly, by the door, moved with a speed I hadn't known he possessed. Stepping forward, intercepting Michael, blocking his path. That's enough, Michael, David said, his voice low, firm, unyielding. It's over. At that exact, almost preternaturally timed moment, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. It was 2 uniformed police officers. Ms. Davies, my astute lawyer, had advised me to have them on standby, to call them discreetly if Michael became aggressive or if the situation escalated beyond my control. Just before I'd played the damning recording, I had texted a prearranged code word to Ms. Davies, who had then immediately contacted the local precinct. One of the officers, a tall, serious-looking man with a name tag that read Officer Miller, stepped into the foyer. We received a call about a potential disturbance here, he said. his gaze sweeping the tense, silent room. A possible extortion attempt? And threats involving an elderly, vulnerable person? My voice was shaking, but firm, as I stepped forward. "Yes, officer," I said, gesturing towards my brother, who was now struggling in David's restraining grip. "That's my brother, Michael Hayes. He demanded $50,000 from me and threatened to harm or abduct my mother, Eleanor Hayes, who suffers from dementia and lives here under my care. If I didn't pay him, I have a recording of his direct threat." Michael was dumbfounded for a moment, then exploded in a torrent of furious denials and vitriolic accusations, claiming I had set him up, that I was twisting his words, that I was trying to ruin him. But the crystal-clear recording, combined with my calm, detailed testimony and David's unwavering corroboration, was damning. Aunt Carol and Uncle Joe, visibly shaken but resolute, also spoke to the officers, confirming Michael's long history of financial irresponsibility, his manipulative tendencies, and his pattern of preying on our mother's good nature. The officers, after a brief consultation, moved to cuff Michael. As they led him out of our home, out of our lives, he screamed at me, his face contorted with a terrifying, impotent rage. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You'll pay for this. You'll never see me again. And Mom will hate you for doing this to me. She'll never forgive you." Mom was weeping, utterly distraught, completely overwhelmed and confused by the chaos, by the sight of her beloved son, her Michael, being arrested and led away by the police. "My boy," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "My Michael, what's happening? Where are they taking him?" Sarah and David rushed to her side, trying to comfort her, to soothe her, knowing that a long, painful, and likely repetitive process of explaining lay ahead of them. Aunt Carol put a comforting, steadying arm around my shoulders. "You did the right thing, dear," she said softly, her voice filled with a sad understanding. "The hardest thing, perhaps, but absolutely the right thing. Your mother will be safe now. That's all that matters." Michael, unsurprisingly, faced serious charges of extortion and making terroristic threats, with the undeniable evidence of the recording, my testimony, and the corroborating statements from David, Aunt Carol, and Uncle Joe. The case against him was overwhelmingly strong. He eventually, grudgingly, took a plea deal that included a significant period of jail time, mandatory anger management and psychological counseling, and, most importantly for us, a permanent, legally binding restraining order preventing him from ever contacting Mom or me again. Mom, of course, was devastated by Michael's betrayal, his arrest, the public airing of our family's dirty laundry. It took months of gentle explanations, endless patience, and unwavering support from me, from David, from her therapists, for her to even begin to process the enormity of what her son had done. Her memory issues made it a recurring trauma, each new day bringing a fresh wave of confusion and grief as the reality of Michael's actions, and his absence, would hit her anew. But slowly, painstakingly, without Michael's toxic, manipulative presence constantly stirring up trouble and anxiety, a fragile, hesitant peace began to return to her, to our home. She started to enjoy her grandchildren more, to engage in her old hobbies, her baseline anxiety visibly lessening day by day. Cousin Linda, facing potential legal scrutiny for her own minor, albeit unhelpful, involvement in Michael's scheme, cooperated fully with the authorities, providing further evidence of Michael's desperation and his dangerous association with unsavory characters like Vinny the Hammer Costello. It turned out Michael had been far deeper in debt to far more dangerous people than even I had imagined. The $50,000, the sum that had threatened to tear our lives apart, remained safe and untouched in our savings account. The immediate threat was gone. Our family, though profoundly shaken, deeply scarred, was secure once more. I felt an immense, overwhelming sense of relief, of course, but also a profound, lingering sadness. Sadness for the brother I had lost long, long ago to his own demons. Sadness for the immense pain and confusion my mother had been forced to endure. David and I focused all our energy on creating a stable, loving, peaceful environment for Mom and for our children, on slowly, carefully rebuilding our lives, our sense of normalcy. The discreet security cameras eventually came down. The house felt lighter, safer. Finally free of the oppressive shadow Michael had cast for so long. Thanksgiving the following year was a quiet, almost deliberately subdued affair. Just me, David, Emily, Josh, and Mom. And for a few precious, fleeting hours, Mom seemed almost like her old self, humming along contentedly as Emily played Christmas carols on the piano. A little early, perhaps, but no one minded. A genuine, peaceful smile gracing her lips. That Thanksgiving, my brother, my own flesh and blood, tried to hold my mother hostage, tried to extort a fortune from me by threatening the one person in this world I would die to protect. And I was terrified. Absolutely, paralyzingly terrified. But then, somewhere deep inside, a different emotion began to stir. I was determined. The legal battle that followed was ugly. The emotional toll on my mother, on all of us, was immense. But seeing Michael led away in handcuffs that day wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy. A profound, heartbreaking tragedy that he, and he alone, had brought upon himself, upon our family. We didn't just save our money that day. We saved my mother from a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing, who just happened to share her blood. Sometimes, I've learned, protecting the people you love means making impossible, agonizing choices. Choices that can tear your family apart in order to ultimately, hopefully, save it. It's a lesson I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it makes me wonder. And I put this question to you. When a family member engages in such harmful, threatening, or even illegal behavior, especially when it's directed towards a vulnerable relative, where do you draw the line? What is the boundary between family loyalty, that deep-seated instinct to protect your own, and the fundamental responsibility to ensure safety, to uphold the law, to do what is right, even if it's excruciatingly painful? A. Family is family, no matter what. You try to handle such crises internally to shield the family from outside scrutiny, and you avoid involving authorities or legal intervention if at all humanly possible, even at great personal cost. B. The safety, dignity, and well-being of the vulnerable person and adherence to the fundamental principles of law and morality must always take precedence, even if it means reporting a family member, causing irreparable rifts, and forever altering the landscape of your family. What would you have done?